Good morning, parents. Thanks for joining us for Coffee and the Word, where we talk about the Bible, everyday life, and parenting principles. We've been talking about being spirit-filled, and we just finished up talking about the spirit-filled wife, and now we're going to talk about the spirit-filled husband.
So if you've been with us for a while, we've been in Ephesians 5 looking at a lot of great content from Paul. This is one of his prison epistles where he's under house arrest, kind of like we are. Yeah. And he talks about making the most of every opportunity, which is interesting in that season. Right. We spent a long time on what it means to be spirit-filled and the spirit-filled wife. And so we are going to keep going because it would be unfair to stop there.
No, I thought we would
just stop with wives?
Done. Yeah.
Oh, you said be done.
Yeah, just be done.
I thought you said beat them. I was like, wow, you learned nothing. No. We really need this passage. No. Be done? Okay. Be done. We're going to pick up. Yeah, it is pretty terrible.
Okay.
We're going to pick up in verse 25 of Ephesians 5. So hopefully you have your Bible and you're following along. Or maybe you read this later in the day. That's okay too. But Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she might be holy and blameless.
Okay, so there is a lot here, but the foundational principle starts at the very beginning with one word: husbands, love. And so I love steak.
Ribeye.
Ribeye.
Ribeye is so good.
Yeah. I love golf.
Yep.
I love hunting.
I love coffee.
Ooh, yes. Coffee.
Coffee is great. You love water sports, being in the water.
Yeah, what do you love?
Coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Steak.
Coffee and sitting in the van by herself with no kids.
Walking around Target with coffee by myself. Time alone. And coffee. And Jesus.
What do you love? What do you love out there? Are there things that you really enjoy doing or having or eating?
That you'd say you love.
Right. See, the thing is, we say love interchangeably for so many different things.
Right. It's really a language problem.
Yeah, because we say, I love my wife, and I love this coffee.
And I love the Lord.
And obviously, I can kind of do without this. But
you can.
I can't do without this. That's impossible.
And you can't do without the Lord. The three of those things cannot be equal.
For sure. And so what we have to understand is many languages outside of the English language use multiple words for love, but explaining different things. But love's one of them.
Right.
Whereas we have one word. We have the word love that we use to communicate a lot of different things. And so actually what we see here in the Greek, which is what the New Testament was written in, they do have 4 different types of love. This is one of those types of love. Mm-hmm. And the specific love that is used in this phrase is agape love. And agape love, when you look at the definition, this is the love that is always attributed to God.
Right.
And so
like
whenever
the words unconditional love.
Yes, and that's what it means. Mm-hmm. You stole my definition.
I'm so sorry.
But there are other loves, one of them being phileo love, which
brotherly love?
Yeah, whenever Paul's writing, he's talking about loving one another.
Okay.
As brotherly love, he uses that love, and there's a couple others as well. There's, this romantic, passionate love.
Eros, right?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I know like this much Greek. And you picked the one
word.
word.
So you know what? When I learned Greek in college, my professor said after our first semester, he's like, now you know just enough to be dangerous.
Right. Just enough to think you know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
But in this passage, just to give the context of what he's saying is, we have a confused mindset of what love actually is.
Sometimes people read this verse, husbands love your wives, and they think, oh, he's supposed to be kind. Like, that's not what the word love means. Like, we think of...
And definitely not what this usage of the word love.
Right. Or we might think of love like that butterfly in our stomach kind of love.
Which, that's the eros.
Eros love.
That's part of
right,
the
but that's
understanding.
not this love.
Right.
And that's important. This
Right.
is a love without conditions,
Yes.
a love when you're not loved back,
Right.
a love when it's not deserved.
Right.
This is a hefty
Hosea
command. A hefty command for husbands. Did you
Right.
say Hosea love?
Yes. Hosea
That's a
love.
horrible kind of love to have to give.
To have to give it. And then,
No! Poor
Yeah.
Hosea, man.
Yeah,
Do you
but
guys
it's what-
know the story of Hosea?
But it's what God called him to do.
And it's what he's calling you to do to me.
Oh, great. Well, don't go play the harlot, which is what his wife does.
Yeah,
So-
Hosea marries this woman.
No, God tells Hosea to go marry this woman
Right.
because his life and his marriage to her is representing the way the Israelites,
Are following God.
aka us,
God's people.
follow God.
Right.
In the fact that regardless of how much God loves us and communicates his faithfulness to us, we still run and play the harlot.
Yeah, commit adultery with other things that we put before God in our life all the time. And so he has to marry this prostitute who continually he has to go buy back
Yeah.
over and over again, showing unconditional love that she clearly does not deserve.
Right, which
But that's
is
the same love
also
here.
the picture that we see here and we see in Jesus. So, he says, husbands, love your wives. And so, first of all, look at that context. He's talking about an unconditional, I can't use love, but unconditional commitment and...
It's a choice, really.
Yeah,
It's a
choice
choice.
to take care of, and we'll get to those different
Yeah,
things.
when I think about this, it's a choice of the heart and the mind.
Okay.
Regardless of how I feel, regardless
Yeah.
of what I want, I'm choosing to love.
Okay.
And
So it says, husbands, love your wives, and then he gives an example
yeah.
of what he means by that.
to
so
the
this
degree
is
that.
so this is how you see it, like husbands unconditionally commit to your wives, just as Christ also unconditionally committed to the church and gave himself up for her. And so that's where you begin to see where, like we talked about with Hosea, is now you have given up your life. You've given up your decisions, your choices. You become a servant. Remember, we're talking about subject yourself to one another.
Yeah.
That's what being spirit-filled
This theme
is.
has, it's persisted for a long time. And so we've been studying it over the course of many days. And so sometimes we forget the context that comes before. This is just a good lesson in Bible study in general. Always go back and see what's been communicated. See the context. The idea of subjection and submission and mutually putting yourself under it has been
and we
happening
talked
for a
about that, the
while.
one another, subject to one another.
Right.
And so then he starts to give the examples of wives, this is what subjection looks like for you. Husbands, this is what subjection looks like for you.
Right.
And we're going to get to children, this is what subjection looks like for you. Stick with us. And I don't know, it's probably going to be like 6 more days before we ever get there. I don't know. It's going to be a while.
So he says that you do this. You love your wife. You're under subjection to her in a different way. This unconditional laying aside of your will and submitting unconditionally in the same way that Jesus did for the church, which we've looked at before with Philippians 2. How
Right,
He
and
laid aside.
I would like to just, I'm going the wrong way. It's just one page the other way. Just to recap what he says in 2, do nothing in verse 3, do nothing from selfish ambition or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. And so there again you see the one another thing. Like this is,
One another.
there is a scenario, many of us live in this scenario, where the love is one-sided, and I'm sorry if that's the scenario, but the goal is to be this one another teammate mentality. That's what we're striving for.
Well, it's certainly a lot easier to do, right?
Yes.
We've talked about that before. It fuels the desire to keep loving when you have somebody else loving you. And so we do have to remember that Christ is enough.
Yeah.
And so if you're in that one-sided love, that one-sided, you're not getting it back to fuel it, well, Christ is enough. Like, he loves you enough to make up for that person's faults and weaknesses.
Right.
And his command, like, it comes from him. You as to the Lord.
Right.
Over and over again. Like, the reason we do this is not because they deserve it. It's because we love the Lord, and this is part of our service to him.
Right.
So
So it says, do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but the interest of others.
mm-hmm.
Have this attitude in yourselves, which is also in Christ Jesus, who, although existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking on the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men, being found in the appearance of as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even on the cross. And so when he references and says, just as Christ loved the church and gave up himself for her,
he's
like,
painting a very detailed picture.
yeah, like, first of all, God, who is Jesus is in heaven.
He's got it all.
He is God. He can't physically die because he's God.
He's eternal.
And it says that even though he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped. He realized we could not attain it. We couldn't grab it. We couldn't get it on.
Well, and
any
it
of
was
our
also
own
not
merit.
something for him to cling to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so he casts it off.
And
He
it says
literally
he
puts
empties
himself literally puts himself under rank.
Mm-hmm.
He casts off his rank, his authority, all that he deserves, lays it aside.
For a really good person?
No.
No.
For people who, while we were yet sinners,
Right.
he died.
Right, exactly.
For people who played with the harlot,
Mhm.
like Hosea's wife.
Yeah.
For
Jesus is, Hosea is a picture of Jesus.
for billions of people that would never choose to follow him, right? Because he died for the sins of the whole world. And so it's even for those who would not follow. Like,
Right.
you're redeeming a bride that doesn't even get married to you in the end in some cases.
Right.
And so,
So
this
often-
is a huge picture.
And often we think, like, to the point of death, even death on the cross, and we look at that and we go, oh, that's awful and that's a terrible thing, because we think about, like, what it would be to die ourselves because we're fleshly, you know? But that's, like, the smallest part of this whole thing
Right,
that he
think
gave
about,
up.
even just making the choice to become human. Like, that was a huge sacrifice.
Right. So now we're talking about husbands are supposed to replicate what Jesus did in their homes. And, you know, we struggle with just, like, helping our wife out. You know, like, he literally paid for our sins.
Right.
And, you know, we like to sit there and say, oh, our wife is nagging.
Or I take care of the outside, she's got the inside. Like, she's home all day. What is she doing anyway?
Yeah.
Like, we are so crafty and good at rationalizing reasons, like, to allow our stupidity. Like, we all do it, not just husbands, but
yeah. Well, so we had talked when we were back in Genesis 1, looking at the original creation of man and our original purpose and all that kind of stuff. We had looked at how there was a curse that came to the woman, that she would desire her husband's power and he will rule over her. You remember that? Now, there's almost the reverse side. When you think about, okay, the woman is cursed. Well, now, the man with that curse is lazy. Because he
can be, because his wife will just do it.
Exactly.
Because of the curse.
Because he doesn't have to, because he does because he just doesn't want to deal with the nagging anymore, because he doesn't want to put up with that. So he just lets it happen, and he just gets lazy and goes off into his man cave and hides.
He's kind of been enabled to be lazy, because the wife is like, I want to do it my way anyway.
Oh yeah, often you say this just about ministry and volunteers and serving in the church. You're like, sometimes you need to move out of the way and stop filling the hole.
Right.
So
Don't
that
do the job.
someone can see the need and do it.
We do this with our kids. Like,
Yeah.
I think about just the tendency of, like, our 3 children, and, like, our oldest, she is kind of self-initiated. Like, she'll get the job done. You can trust her and walk away. My middle child, she loves to spend time with us, and so she'll, like, unload the dishwasher with me or clean the house with me. As long as there's a with me, she's good. My youngest, he's the one that the other 2 could enable to, like, not participate in the chores and do the work because he's the baby. He's going to go have fun and be silly. Right. This is why I know this, because I watched you do it to
with
your
my sister.
Yeah. Yes. And how it was enabled. And it's kind of that same thing. Like, I could enable you to not have to lead, to not have to make decisions, to not have to work, because I'll just take care of it.
Well, and then there's other things too. It's not just the curse, but just natural personalities. Some people have this servant heart. A lot of women do, not that men don't, but a lot of women have this, I don't know, you can go do a personality test.
It's the help me thing.
Yeah, they have this servant personality, and they will get walked all over.
Right.
You know, and husbands can end up taking advantage because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing and actually being the church, or being Christ to their wife. You know, and
they become like this doormat of just trampled over because they're always laying out their life for the sake of their husband.
Right, and there's that, but it's even like they enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well, it's where they find their meaning, their identity.
It's part of their personality. It's who God.
Well, it's a spiritual
gift.
Like that's a huge thing.
Right, and so husbands, we have to be very careful here into being who God created us to be. And one of those things is to unconditionally love our wife. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I don't know, you know, how the original curse is affecting your relationship.
Mm-hmm. Nor do we.
Right, but I'm saying I don't know how the curse of like her trying to usurp your authority is affecting your relationship. But regardless of what she's doing and how she's acting, it says to unconditionally love her life.
There's it's not because it's deserved.
Yeah.
It's not because she's fulfilling her role and doing her part. It's not because you just feel like it.
Right, and this is where separation begins to happen. Is unfulfilled expectations begin to happen in a relationship over time, and you just become numb to it. Mm-hmm. And one numbness becomes two numbness, becomes three numbness, and now there's this like wall between the two of you, and you no longer have the relationship. You're like, what happened? We fell out of love.
We drifted apart. Mm-hmm. We grew in different directions.
Yeah, and honestly, what it is we haven't stopped subjecting ourselves or submitting to one another. The wife doesn't try and serve the husband, and the husband doesn't try and serve the wife. They live two completely different lives under the same roof.
Sometimes for Jesus, but they're just going like this.
Yeah.
Completely diverging, never coming back and being intentional about
the
most intentional relationship we've been given apart from Christ.
Right, and you're not that equally yoked. And I'm not even talking believers and unbelievers. I'm saying we're not equally yoked in our purpose.
We're not
focus.
Even yoked, really.
Right.
We've taken off the yoke and said
I'm
just gonna go my own direction.
Yeah, but I'm saying you are yoked because you've got.
But
you've got kids, and you're teaching them something. Yeah.
Oh yes, they're always watching.
And so, it's very tough. This is a very tough thing to do in our life, but looking for that unconditional aspect. And what we see from 1 Corinthians 7 is that through our devotedness to Christ, our devotedness to love the person over time, hopefully the faithfulness of God will show in their life. Mm-hmm. And they'll come to know who Christ is, and they too will get this understanding and this wave.
There's a passage that says love covers a multitude of sins. Mm-hmm. And it was a hard verse for me for a long time because I was like, I don't really understand it. But when you think about it in terms of subjection to one another and how love can be a motivator for someone else to follow the Lord or to get their act together, you win more with honey, right?
Than vinegar.
Yeah, than vinegar. It's that idea, in your love and unconditional devotion, that could be the wake-up call for the other person.
Right.
And get them right with the Lord and right with you and right in your home. It is a fight worth fighting.
Right.
And sometimes it's a fight, but we fight it.
Yeah, so what we see from our passage today, and we're going to continue going through the rest of Ephesians 5, talking about husbands in more detail, but we see that to be a spirit-filled husband, we have to unconditionally love our wife, regardless of who they are, how they act, and the sin that they have in their life, so that we can show them the way to who Christ is. So thanks for joining us for Coffee and the Word, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8 as we continue this conversation of the Spirit-filled husband.